For years, President Trump dubbed himself the king of debt. But a new Washington Post deep dive shows that over the last decade, more of the Trump organization's purchases came in cash. The Post writes, quote, "In the 9 years before he ran for president, Donald Trump's company spent more than $400 million in cash on new properties, including 14 transactions paid for in full without borrowing from banks during a buying binge that defied real estate industry practices and Trump's own history as the self-described king of debt." Joining me now, one of the authors of that story, Pulitzer Prize-winning political reporter for the Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst, David Fahrenthold. David, thanks so much for being here. I'm sort of going to steal some of Sam Stein's off-camera questions here, which is the thing that you don't say out loud here is that this potentially reeks of money laundering. Now, I know that the reporting does not go that far, but put this in context for people. Like, why is this such a big deal?
Well, it's a big deal because nobody does this, right? Nobody buys giant golf courses. And we're talking about, in these cases, golf courses that cost $80 million for just two of them and that lose money year after year, requiring more money to put in. Nobody buys that sort of thing in cash because it's just risky to sink all your own cash into something. So
you borrow it from a bank, you spread the risk around.
Yeah, you get co-investors, you borrow it from a bank. This is what Trump did his whole life until he started doing it totally differently in 2006. So the question was, why would you defy something that seemed to be at the core of his identity as a developer? And he borrowed a lot of money. And the answer for Trump basically was they felt like it. They thought it was too risky to borrow money starting in 2006. And they had the money. They had so much money coming off their other businesses that they could invest this way without any problem.
So what is the potential benefit to buying in cash that you wouldn't get using more traditional ways? Like, I mean, how does this potentially help them?
The benefit for them is they say they can move faster. So they say that they heard about the Doonbeg golf course in Ireland, which cost them more than $10 million, 7 days before they decided to buy it. No bank would give you a loan that quickly for a large and money-losing golf course because it's not a good investment. But this allows them to move quickly. They just spend their own money. And for him, he says they just like to have, Eric Trump says, like to have these investments that sort of turn out cash. It's not a risky real estate business as much as it's sort of an annuity, a risk-averse cash business now.
Sam said, I mean, there are not very many people that just have $400 million in cash lying around.
Speak for yourself, Kim.
Oh, really? Care to share?
Just under my mattress, a few bills. No, it's weird. This is super weird. $400 million in cash just lying around to play with and buy golf courses is basically unheard of, especially when you can borrow money for really cheap right now. It's not like interest rates are particularly high and it's prohibitive to do that. So yes, there are a lot of questions around here. I looked it up because money laundering is a very specific legal definition, and what we do not know is the origins of the money that they had on hand, which would be a money laundering definition. You have to have criminally generated money putting it into something that looks legally appropriate. And so who knows where this money came from, but that is to borrow a phrase, $30 million question, or $400 million question.
$400 million.
The $400 million question is, where did this money come from? Why did he suddenly decide that, he didn't want to take on debt? I mean, he did go through some bankruptcies. Maybe he was scarred by that.
I was going to say, like, he didn't have, before, he didn't seem to have any problem borrowing more money and spending, going bankrupt, and then fixing it all over again.
And the weird thing about this period is that even as Eric Trump says we'll become a much more conservative company, would buy everything in cash, they take out two gigantic loans to buy the Doral Golf Course in Florida and the old post office building that's now a hotel in D.C. Those two together are $295 million. So
I have one question, because there were all these previous reports that he was having such trouble getting banks to loan to him, and Deutsche Bank was the only bank that would loan to him. How do these two things coexist? How was he having such trouble trying to find a bank, which is premised on the idea that he was trying to get a bank to loan to him, and the incredible liquidity that he had with cash?
That doesn't make a lot of sense. Eric Trump squares those two by saying, well, we could have gotten loans from banks. Everybody wanted to loan to us, but we chose not to do it. It seems like if you had $400 million in cash, you're the kind of person a bank would want to lend to, because you're not a credit risk. And in most places, most businesses, if they had that much cash, they'd multiply the power of their cash by borrowing some and seeding that money across a lot of
especially with interest rates so low, because you in theory could then invest and get a higher rate of return while at the same time borrowing. Oh boy. All right. Well, David Fahrenthold, yet another fascinating story. Please come back with the next one. We really appreciate your reporting.